I can't talk about Korea without talking about collectivist orientation. If you want to be in Seoul, buy a house and have children, it's very expensive. There's standards. There's not a lot of difference between Koreans and Americans. The one difference that I think is important. First, I think it's really important that Korea has a very unique history, looking back to the past 60 or 70 years and since the war. And I think it's important that when we think about the culture of Korea, we include what life was like back when I was just a child and how difficult life was, so that stability that comes with money is really important. In the United States, we had a very similar thing with the Great Depression. So people who were, say, my parents and my grandparents who went through the Great Depression, they prioritized hard work and saving money and making sure that they could pay for their basic necessities and things that they needed. That became really ingrained here in Korea as very, very important. So it's not just money for the sake of flashing money around so I can show the world, hey, look, I have all this money, but rather money for the sake of stability and material well-being. And second is the idea that Koreans are not just working really hard for themselves and their own family, but Koreans are also work really hard for the benefit of all of society. This is the nature of a collectivist or communitarian culture. And this also emerges out of the war. The Koreans have really built a nation out of destruction and great poverty. And so to say, for example, that material well-being is the most important thing in the West, whereby me and who I am is really about me and my family in the West. But here in Korea, me and who I am is also about the people around me. So you can't separate a desire for material well-being or think that that's really important from the material well-being of me and the material well-being of people around me. There's a really interesting nationalism here in Korea that is not a nationalism in the way that we often think about it around the world, but it is really holding up the nation as a whole and seeing everybody around us as part of this larger umbrella of community, country, and nation. And so everything that I do, I'm doing it for me, I'm doing it for my family, but I'm also doing it for other people in the nation. And that has such great value here in Korea, and it's one of the biggest reasons that Koreans have been able to grow and prosper and build the nation that you've been able to build in a short period of time. Parenting around the world is a great mystery. Parents all over the world are doing the exact same thing. In that sense, there's not a lot of difference between Koreans and Americans. I think that the one difference that I think is important is that bringing up a child in a collectivist or communitarian society is different than bringing up a child in an individualist society. Because you're bringing a child into the world here in Korea to share, knowing that that child is going to be part of this larger nation and part of this place of all these other people around. In my nation, for example, that part of child rearing is much weaker. And so the sense of how the child fits into the rest of the community is just a little bit weaker. I think one of the struggles here in Korea is with perfectionism in children. And this goes back to this idea of a culture that is built around getting the right answer, not making mistakes, making sure we don't stand out. And so we're raising children in a way that you have to make sure that all that happens. And then in the process, what you're really doing is raising children who are going to have to walk a very difficult line and be allowed to and struggle with making mistakes and not being perfect, which is a very strange thing. And that's hard. And imagine a different way, which is like, I'm going to raise my child what my child feels like doing. I'm not going to be stressed. I'm not going to put my child in cram school, the hagwons, to make sure that they're the top scorer in their class and build all this stress around them. That's very, very difficult to take that position here in Korea. Many parents do, and I've met many parents who do that. When the parents do that, the children still pick it up from other people around them, from their classmates. So it's this struggle that's always going on. A lot of younger Koreans are delaying getting married, and those who get married are delaying having children. Not to live, it's fine, but if you want to be in Seoul and you want to ultimately buy a house and a car and have children, pay for all the bills and so on, it's very expensive. expensive. And so you're going to need to get a lot of these experiences out of the way. And so naturally, people delay. And we also know that more educations are more likely to delay the time before getting married and less likely to have children. So Korea, in an odd way, is a victim of its own success. Now here you say, oh, we need to have more children in Korea. Well, you needed a population that was less educated. You would have more children. So it's very ironic. It's very interesting. In the book, I talk about the relationship that I have with my wife. And I talk about two types of relationships. One is an integrated relationship in which the couple is very connected and very tied together, and their lives are woven around one another. And so they do things together. They go out to dinner together. They go out with friends, but they're together. They spend a lot of time sort of really deciding how they're going to live life by looking at one another and consulting one another. And then I talk about the parallel relationships. And the parallel relationships are very, what we say in English as transactional relationships. It's two people who are living their lives side by side, but they're not really integrated. They live different lives. They have different friends, they have different interests, they have different roles that they play, but they're married or they're connected. But here in Korea, I see more parallel relationships than I do integrated relationships. I can't talk about Korea or Korean culture without talking about collectivist orientation. You know, one of the drawbacks of that, it can diminish actually thinking outside the box. People disagree with the group, and that disagreement becomes the foundation of something that's very innovative, where innovation is really built on disagreement. And so, you know, you don't just look around and say, hey, what is everybody else doing? Let me not raise my hand because I have to follow. There's that pressure to follow. And that's one of the problems of a collectivist culture. Social media here in Korea, there's so many things that are the same. There's a way to do it in Korea. There is no single way to do social media in the United States. Whatever it is, YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, there are certain trends and patterns that people follow, but you know, there's so many diverse ways of operating. But wow, here in Korea, whether it's Insta or YouTube, I know it's Korean. There's standards. There's just ways in which it operates. And so I find that really fascinating. That happens. And I think it's a weak point, but it's also a strong point because it just makes everybody is reproducing this thing called Korean culture. So Hallyu is this wave that is very definitively and very clearly a Korean wave. And so everywhere you see the wave, you see Korea. It's like, it's not lots of different things, you know, it's one thing. You know, it's just crashing on the shores all over the world, but it's very definitively Korean. In living in the modern age with these phones and all this social media, it's very difficult to not compare ourselves to people around us. In the book, I talk about why it's important to resist that and how we can resist that if we really pay attention to it, because it's going to happen. And I didn't grow up with that. I didn't grow up with an endless stream of images telling me to be somebody other than who I am. And so we can take those images in, accept them as part of the culture in which we live, and yet at the same time, look deep within us and figure out how we want to be in the world, just by ourselves. In the book, I tell the story of my childhood and spending a lot of time around older people. And I saw the different types of older people. And I was able to say to myself, you know, if I'm lucky, I'll grow to be that age. And who do I want to be? And what I say in the book is look at the old people, the elders in your life, and decide which kind of elder do I need to be? And then use that person as a model for who you are day after day after day. What you'll notice probably is that person is not concerned about all of the many different things that you are concerned about as a younger person. And if that's the case, then think about all of these things that you're concerned about. Maybe you don't need to be worrying about them. Maybe there are other things that are bigger, that are larger, that are more important or valuable that you could be concerned about. But my advice is always look to the elders and decide what kind of elder do you want to be and then move in that direction. I talk about how I was a saver all throughout my childhood. Everything that I spent, I had to earn again. I quickly realized that the places where I spent money very often don't bring me any lasting happiness. And coupled with that, I realized that I did have basic needs, and my basic needs were going to require me to have a certain amount of money. And so the more money that I saved to pay for my basic needs, the more time I can have to pursue all of the interesting things in life that I want to pursue. And what I told myself in the times when I didn't have money is that I wasn't supposed to have money. In that period of my life, I was supposed to be doing something else. There were other opportunities for me instead of being unhappy that I didn't have the money that I thought that I needed. And I tell that to other people. You need a very small amount of money to survive, but you need a great deal of creativity and thoughtfulness in order to thrive. So invest in the creativity and invest in the thoughtfulness, because the money will come and the money will go. And I always had the idea myself that I wasn't ever supposed to make a lot of money. It wasn't part of that. So I didn't pursue money. My goal was to be happy. My goal was to be content. And I wanted to develop my mind as far as I could possibly develop my mind. That was the most important thing for me, and that doesn't require money.